I have to say, I came into this project slightly biased because in my other life as a poet, transliteration was my jam and mixing languages together was my jam. So when Nigel came to me and said, hey, here are some poems, I want to know what they say. And then I read that subtitle that Lo Hui's just told us about, that these poems weave together Chinese and European languages. I was like, okay, this clearly needs to be a bigger project. We clearly need to make a book out of it. So today we've made one stanza out of this entire 28 poems possible. And this one stanza took me about a good 10 to 15 hours. And what I learned already in setting this one stanza was how to relate to Danny Chan's experience of working in the typesetting office in Allen Street, working with his father, the editor, Lionel Chan. Because, we had a good chat with Danny, and he told us what it was like to be in that print office. His dad would give him the copy, and he was responsible for picking out the type. So his job was to walk back and forth in the printing office, pulling out the relevant typecase and finding that particular character. And he said, well, sometimes there were moments where he couldn't find the character. The compartment was empty, there was no more. So at that point, he would try and problem solve by going to find that same character in a different size for a substitution, if he could. If he couldn't find a substitution, he had to go back to his dad and say, you'll have to change the text. So it's really curious to think that through these 28 poems, some of those lines could have ended up the way they were because in the typesetting office, we were out of sorts, that character wasn't there. Or, they had to find other ways of making those substitutions. I've seen a couple of homophones, so characters you wouldn't normally use but sound the same. So really interesting improvisations that I think fulfill and embody the playfulness of this poetic genre. So Danny was in the print shop with his brother Ting, his younger brother Ting. And when Danny, who could read Mandarin and Cantonese, he could read the characters, when he found the character, he would throw it across the room to Ting. Now, I don't know if this was an exaggeration, if this was what actually happened, but I feel like the pair were very mischievous, because we've also had stories of how they would prank the people who came to the auctions by trying to drop pieces of lead from the hell box, unusable pieces of lead, just dropping them on the people coming to the auctions downstairs. So I'm like, okay, maybe they did throw them across the print room, but then I hope Ting was a very good catcher because these are very small pieces of type. Rest assured, when I was setting the stanza, there was no throwing and no catching involved. I was working with a picking box, so it was just immediately from the case into the box. And it was a very fulfilling process to me, even though Danny talked about it as being quite a tedious and time-consuming process. Because as I was working on it, it was becoming clear to me each step that I was taking, there was a new logic being revealed to me about how this language is composed. So I can imagine when Lionel was sitting at his writing desk composing these poems, he was thinking about the emotions that he wanted to elicit in the reader, or the kind of social criticism he wanted to make about the society, how it was transforming in Wellington, how Chinese peoples might be shifting in relation to their culture. So he was thinking about all those abstract ideas. And then when Danny picked up this piece of copy and had to think about how to transform it from abstract ideas to concrete, compositions and layouts for the printing press, I had to break it down into a radical and stroke order. So suddenly all of these 28 characters in the stanza made a different kind of sense. And then when I go into the Chinese Scholar Studio, where these heritage cases are currently stored, it's a different order yet again, because the type cases, while they do follow radical stroke, they break it down into frequently used characters and then infrequently used characters. So it's like you took a limerick and then you broke up all the letters and you sorted them alphabetically, and you just knew, okay, I need to find 28 I's, and then followed by 14 E's. So you had a list of all those letters and how many you needed of each one. But then suddenly it wasn't alphabetical, because you had to go, well, it was all the E's. You pulled out all the highly frequently used things. Anyways, I won't get into the details. It's quite combobulated sometimes. But what I loved was the morphing of how you realize this abstract idea through this process, and it comes out the other side and it makes sense again. And I really love that. And you can share that with people. And translation projects are around that sense of sense making and how we make sense of these poems.